All right. um, so what I really want to do is like the whole point, like the reason I really wanted to do this was
Yeah.
to document process. Um, and I found that it's really important to document process like when you're in the thick of it and not like that much later.
Yeah, because it's, things that you might not even be conscious of that you're doing right now.
Yeah, and the biggest thing, like how many times have we worked on something where it's like, um, we'll be working on a track and we'll be writing something and we'll have like these while we're doing it, we're having these like amazing discussions about like layering and psychological effects of doing something in a song and what the song should be, could be, all these really wonderful things. And it's like this really enlightening kind of conversation about what we're making. And then like, 2 years later we listen to it.
Yeah, and the thought is just like, oh, that sounds good.
Yeah,
That's
or
cool.
like, oh, we
Yeah.
could do that better.
Yeah.
And we're so far removed from that. And really for me it's at least like when you listen to something years after you've done it, or even like for me, months after you've done it, you're like just hypercritical of it, because it's kind
Yeah.
of out there. And then you've grown already probably since then. Like how many, you know what I mean? Just like you listen to things and it's just
Yeah.
like, oh, it's cool, but maybe it could have been engineered better, or maybe it could have been,
Yeah, totally.
and we reapproach stuff that we wrote forever ago too. And so I think that's really important. Like just like while you're in it. Like I just finished these last 2 tracks like last week for this like record,
Yeah,
and
so it's still totally fresh.
it's still so fresh. I mean, even now I'm kind of like, all right, what's the next thing? Like so like there's still there's some stuff that so I think I just wanted to document this because I thought the process here was really cool and really kind of special, and I don't get a lot of opportunities to do a project like this in a really weird way. Um, and the other thing about documenting process is I just think in general it's so important because I mean like for me, personally, like I was kind of crazy about the sound of animals fighting
Hmm.
and I was a big fanatic for a while and I still am and they put some of my favorite music together. Um and I remember like one day just kind of reading, I don't know if it was on like Spotify or like um YouTube, something. It was just like there was like this bio section somewhere for them and there was like one sentence and it was like, all right, oh, the leader, Rich Balling, had just kind of recorded random stems from, random instruments playing and just kind of told them to go and do their thing. And then he kind of ended up quantizing it and kind of just mashed it all together, kind of like a collage, and created these albums, these first 2 albums. And then the 3rd album being them all in the same room together finally. And it was just like 2 sentences or something like that. And it was just like this really kind of half vague description about it. And that's pretty much what it said. And I was just like looking for more about it. I'm like, well, I need to know more because like I'm like a process junkie, like I'm just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like, how do you make the thing, like, you know, and I couldn't find anything. And I was like, but the thing said this. And like, then you wonder, like, you see it in one spot and it's like, how true is it? You know, um, it was like this really interesting, like John Cagean, like kind of way, like
Hmm.
to kind of like take these things that exist and put them together. And I remember like so they Sound of Animals Fighting in like March 2019 played a reunion something something like they got together and played a tour, and I was lucky enough to get a ticket, and I was there, and I went alone, and I got to the venue. It was like empty, but Matt Ombre, the guitarist, was hanging out, and I've talked to him a few times like to like shows. He's kind of always floating around, and I finally like I was like yes. Like, I asked, I asked him, I'm like, "Hey, like, I gotta ask you about this because I can't find any info on it, but, and I said, I've heard X, Y, and Z about the project, and is it true? And if it is true, how did those kind of like that sound discovery, um, kind of in the box, moving things around, like that's how they discovered their sound? And how did that influence it when you got in the room together finally, like when you were in person?" And he was like, "Yeah, nobody's really asked that before." He's like, "Well, because it was just this discussion about like there's no media outlet that would really ask that, like it's it's just that there's not a whole lot, like when you go out and do these things and when you talk about music, it's not a lot of the kind of process things that you start to see it more now, because this was like years ago when those
Mhm.
records came out. It's like at least a decade ago. Um, at least the first two, and yeah, it was a really nice conversation, and like even he didn't know the whole thing. So I'm like okay, I want to document this in a way, and wherever it ends up, it ends up. But the process was really great. So it, you know it was one of these rare projects, and I think it's something maybe we should do for more stuff because it's like let's what's going on right now, even as we make it.
Yeah, I don't see why not. I think it
Yeah,
can only be helpful.
yeah. Um, so yeah, so I had this thing happen. So I was in this great relationship with this great person, um, and then it had come to an end, unfortunately, and this ending coincided pretty much to the day or the week with the COVID-19 lockdown here in New York in mid March. So we had broken up like St. Patrick's Day or something like that, and for me it's like this project is like a very kind of personal thing, um, but it's also this kind of wonderful process, and there's a line to define where it's like okay, where there's certain things, because this is a record like by two people for two people, like kind of thing about two people, and there's a certain level of um, like it's kind of cryptic in a lot of ways, and
Mhm.
I think there's something really nice about songs just like imagine just a song that can only be truly understood by two people. There's something nice about that to kind of retain that. So the discussion really isn't about like the who and the what. It's really just about the process from that.
Right.
So everything I talk about with that is really just to kind of get you know the context in which the process has started. Um, and anonymity is kind of important, and all that stuff. So yeah, so I this relationship had ended. That this end of my life kind of shut down. This wing of my life, and coincidentally, the whole entire world shut down. Are planes usually that loud?
I don't know. I think it's because we're so close to the airport.
Yes, true. Um, the whole coincidentally, the whole world shut down, and it was kind of like this scenario where it's like, oh, this is really shitty.
Yes,
you
like
know, it,
forced isolation.
yeah, it's this. I was at a point where it's kind of like, this thing happened, like mid March, and then this other giant world event happens, and it's like, you're forced, and it's like I didn't have this kind of any outlet for like, social um, activity or like having friends to kind of vent to or talk to about it because everyone was kind of going through their own thing because of COVID, like people were getting furloughed and laid off and all this stuff. People were dealing with sick people, and there was a lot going on. So it was kind of like I didn't have I kind of had like a lot of this
Like
like
pent up
pent
kind
up,
of.
and not really pent up. I just had like stuff that I needed to kind of get out, and I
Mhm.
didn't have an outlet for it, and it ended up being the best way to get it out. So I had some, we were both artists, and I ended up having some uh recordings of my previous partner playing music, um mostly improvisation. It's like hours of this stuff that just has been compiled.
Mhm.
And I was at a point where like, okay, this is just gonna sit there. This is like this is it, this is kind of the end of the road for this stuff. And there's something so interesting about songwriting and where I had like maybe I had some words, maybe I had some musical thoughts to kind of get it out. And I've been an art musician as long as I can remember. And I was but everything I've done creatively has been collaborative, like highly
Mhm.
collaborative, like in the same, bouncing ideas off people in the same room kind of discussion stuff. Never felt the need to do like something on like my own or like a solo thing. Because I didn't need that outlet, and it was the kind of thing where like, no one's coming to make music during COVID because we're all
Mhm.
scared as hell. So that outlet was always kind of therapeutic in a way where it's like, oh, that doesn't exist either. So
Right.
you don't have you don't have that right now. And I'm like, okay. So I have these stems, and there's something, like I could have sat and I could have like written chords on a guitar, and I could have like said words, but it would have been a lot less meaningful. I think, to the project and to the idea. Like you get artists that, in an unsuccessful way, they'll do that kind of thing, and it's and to an extent, it's like, where's the connection in what's being said and what the song is? Is it like just that G minor chord? It's just placed at that word. It makes you feel sad because you're sad, And for me, that stuff didn't really resonate, and it's not a lot of it does for me. But like when you look at artists like Bon Iver, the first album for Emma, um, it like you it's the perfect acoustic record. You
There's a
get this.
genuine connection with it.
Yeah, there's this man, and he's alone. He's got nothing, and he's just got this shit ass guitar, and he's just gonna play, and he's gonna sing in this falsetto like his foot's been stepped on, and he's been hurt, like kind of thing. And to that, there's an aura about it that you really can't speak to, and some of that stuff where it's like, oh, okay, this is how you approach acoustic guitar music, and like for me to make something from scratch with this. Could have been done, and it would have been pretty nice. But I had this kind of library, this collection of this person that these feelings were very much
Mhm.
about, kind of playing, and I never really intended. I was just, a part of me was just like, okay, I want to just make something kind of for me. Maybe I won't show it. Maybe I'll just kind of like put it out anonymously. And I still kind of did. And I just opened a session, and I just like went through some of it. And I'm like, what's here, and I started like playing with it and processing it in ways where I'm like, okay, I should probably make this unrecognizable
Hmm.
for what instrument it is, what all this stuff is. And I started just like running these clips and these stems through some stuff, and then whenever things started to resonate, and I started to like take these things and like clip them together and start looping things, and seeing how different things react, and it just kind of like turned into this really wonderful process of discovery where it was like, uh, it was collaborative in a way with somebody
Hmm.
who's not there in the room with you. So it's like that's why I kind of call it a silent collaboration, because it's not a solo project, because I'm not grabbing my guitar and writing six
Right.
chords to sing sad things about. And I got to a point where like, there was something really cool going on, and I started to sing over it as like, because I had these poetic ideas, kind of, some words written out, didn't really know what it was. And for this first song, the first song, I had this title, the Little Raven. There was this kind of, idea about, okay, this is something like kind of like dreamy and nostalgic and kind of fuzzy and relaxing. So this is kind of like, okay, so like maybe there's something breathy, and I'm at a point where I don't know what it is. I don't know what the project is. I'm just like, I need to get this out,
Yeah.
and this is a great way of like, having this dialogue between two people where it's kind of, one of them isn't there, and it's kind of like through time where it's like this one person is like playing this stuff, and maybe a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like that person was, and you were maybe around for some of it, and there's like, they were them then,
At that point in time,
and
yeah.
there's someone else now, and it's just something interesting. It's kind of like reaching into the past and just like taking these things and just going like, what is this? And then making art out of it. Um, so yeah, so I made this one, and it was just like so therapeutic, and I just started throwing vocal ideas down. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just do a scratch vocal and have somebody else do it, because I never like I can, I have the ability to sing, but I never like had that level of comfort, where I knew the context in which my voice worked really well.
Mhm.
Because every time I've done it, every time I've sang, it's like, um, you know, just kind of because I had to, because there was no one else to do it. It's just vocalists just come and go so often. It was just kind of this thing out of convenience. But I found that I enjoyed singing on it, which is something I really don't like doing. Record, I'll sing, you know, live show or acoustically, but in the
Mhm.
studio, I'm like, "Oh, man, I don't wanna." And it's I don't know what it is. It's not the fact that I can hear my own voice and I'm self-conscious of it, 'cause, like, I've become very accustomed to that, and I think it's it's one of those things, though, like, when you first hear your voice
Oh,
recorded,
yeah, it
you're
can be
like,
jarring, yeah.
"What is that? That's what I sound like." Because I think you're more you're less nasally in your head or something like
Mm.
that, but I've heard my recorded speaking voice and singing voice so much, I'm just like, "Yeah, that's me." And then psychologically, like, I know what I really sound like when I talk, so I think I'm like I think that's what I hear now, which is a weird point to be at, but yeah, it's not because of that, but and I found that I was like, "Oh, this is kinda nice," and I'd never had this kind of context to sing over, because I didn't really hear anything like it, I was kind of making these things taking this very clean and clear thing, relatively clean and clear, that had some processing on its own as a stem, so I couldn't really take that out. And I was just seeing like, well, okay, what's the aesthetic? Like why? What the why? Okay, here's the who, right? And here's the two people, and this is cool, but like what is making this about this stuff, and the aesthetic I discovered through I think the first one again, just kind of processing these sounds in a way that's kind of like, using things that are really glitchy,
Mhm.
in a way where it's like you've got this like, you maybe maybe like it's like a fuzzy memory, but it's like um maybe you like there's this movie you've seen like 1,000 times, and it's on a TV you don't get, like on a channel you don't get on the TV, but you put it on anyway, and you kind of half see it,
Yeah.
but like you remember what it looks like and all the lines, but it's just like it's like memory. It's like kind of this weird thing, and that's kind of how and it was a large chain of things, and yeah, it was really really crazy. And it became this thing where I did these first 3 tracks because I was in that place. I did them over like a week and a half. I think in the maybe like the first week of May, end of April, something like that. And I ended up turning it into this kind of art thing where it's you have like images associated with it and video, and and there's some clips of my voice, and other things that kind of happen, just again part of these things like voice recordings from however long ago that meant something. um and it became this kind of like art project where it's not just like, okay, music is the primary vehicle for which it comes out, but there's this kind of visual component, and there's this kind of like photography component too, because all these things again were taken from this point in time, and they're just like you're taking them and you're just like you're you're making this collage out of them. What was really cool about the process was that there was this kind of limitation set where I'm kind of like, I'm going to use these things that
Mhm.
are only from the past, and I'm going to make them into something really cool. And it was kind of like this contemporary, like, woodshed. Like in the 20s, I think I've talked about this before, where you'd have the jazz musicians kind of like
Oh,
who were
right, yeah.
bombing in clubs. They would literally, I don't remember who it was, but there's stories that they would lock themselves in a woodshed and just practice 8 hours a day or all day, whatever it was. And there's something about this like um, idea of isolation and how that fuels, how that can be used in in a way where you can fuel something inside you because you're spending time with you're discovering things, and it's very similar to kind of Bon Iver, that kind of origin thing. Um, and I saw great opportunity in that as I started to dive into it, and I'm like, oh, this is really kind of a wonderful imitation.
Yeah, and I noticed, like, I mean, a lot of the to pick out a more technical aspect of it, there's a lot of electronic, elements to it, and it's
Yeah,
cool, like, the juxtaposition rather of, you know, electronic elements coupled with, like, deep emotion,
yeah,
things like that. It's not typically things people associate with,
yeah.
um, each other.
Well, I think that the main difference here was that it wasn't programmed electronic stuff.
Mhm.
I was taking something
Right.
very real that was being played and was running it through these kind of like, whether it was like a guitar effects boutique pedal or like this plugin that's meant for EDM,
Mhm.
but it kind of
Yeah.
stutters things, like, um, And it's so funny, like, because I think because it comes from something that is very human, and and I think the nature of the project, a lot of it was, and it wasn't just like I took a section of improvisation, I ran through stuff. I took like
Yeah.
some of them I just looped. I would listen through this, and I'd be running it through some stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's the moment. I just sit there for like 20 minutes, and I'm just like listening. I'm like, oh, like, and I hear it, and like that's the thing. Something's played once, and I just take it, and just loop it, and then process, and then run through it, run it through stuff, and it was so great because I think I did the first three, and then it was good. I did the first three, and I'm like, oh, this is really therapeutic. This is great. There's things to say, um, that I had to say, and this is great. I feel really good, and I'm just like, okay, cool, that's it. And then like I think it was about a month ago, and I wasn't. I found that I was like, oh no, I need to go back to this. I'm like mentally kind of in this place again somehow. Um, and I didn't, there was no plan on that. It was just kind of like, I was make these three tracks. I'm just gonna put them out and just kind of like, give them to whoever to mix, and um, just kind of, it was kind of like I'm feeling this thing, and originally it was just kind of for me, but it felt good to kind of put it out into even though
Yeah.
if like 20 people listen to it, it's not a big deal. Um, it's really just kind of about like, it's like you're on a mountain and you're kind of shouting or something like that. And it just feels good, like who cares who
Yeah.
hears it? And that's an attitude I have about music. Like it'd be really nice for everyone to hear, the stuff that you and I work on. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's just for the art, like,
Right. Yeah.
it'd be really great to have people hear it, but it's really just about like, let's make something and throw it out there.
Yeah.
And then
Totally.
we could have a whole conversation about like the whole, how dense it is, people putting art out and music out, and how it could or couldn't be problematic. But, like in a perfect world, it's like, yeah, just make art and put it out there. To market it. But philosophically at my core, I'm kind of like, I'm just gonna make this stuff and put it out. So I did these three, and I think it was early July, about a month ago. I just had this thing, and I just popped them out one by one, and it was so quick. And there was six more, so there's nine total on the album. And I hit a point now where I'm like, okay, I did this one like last week, and I'm like, okay, like this is I have reached that point again where I was at the end of the third one, but almost to a higher level where I've kind of explored everything. And there's only a finite amount of library of sounds from that stuff I have.
Right. I mean, if you know, you have to pick the ones that were like what's best for the music. You can't just
Yeah, you can't
use
just completely
everything.
squeeze it dry.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's some left, but I mean, it's just I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, and the method became really interesting because I think I was at a point like the fourth or fifth one where it was just like, oh, I sit down at the computer. I'm like, okay, I'm going to work on this. I'm really feeling this right now, and I have some vocal ideas and some notions about what clips are really mean something for what on like just a musical level, not
Mm.
really anything past that. What's the feeling? What's the idea? Um, and I would sit down on the computer, and it would be like I would like blink and it would be done. I have like my soul would like leave my body, and like it's like you're there but you're not there, and like it's like that Jackson Pollock kind of thing where
Mm.
it's just like automatism. It's like you know you're just gonna let your body go where it goes
Right.
and trust that it's gonna do the thing for the art. And then if you're really
And you can't necessarily repeat it the same way that you did.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm and I think a lot of that comes from how, it was approached, where I would listen through, and the second I heard something, I'd take it and I'd put it on a track that was like, "Okay, this is the keeper stuff." And then I'd get enough through it that I was just like, "Okay, I've listened to enough of this. I'm just gonna go with these things, and I'm just gonna run with it." Run it through stuff, and then, like, it would just kinda get like this big mess of stuff but it was so methodical at the same time, where if you gave me that same stem even like an hour later, like those same recordings to kind of collage around and
Hmm.
process in a way, it would have been completely different, and it was a very in the moment thing.
Yeah.
And it's just like when you're working on something, even like you and I, like, if we're playing and there's this like moment where like you're not really doing it, but it's just kind of creating itself, when you get so deep.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like that's what this is, kind of all about, is just like capturing moments in time, like
Yeah,
capturing who that person was,
right.
who you are now,
Yeah.
who you are while you're putting that together in that very
And all
moment.
the in
Like,
between. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's and a lot of the content is about, it sounds, it's sad because you're looking at these great things through this kind of lens that you're at now. And so the project itself, the process was that, but it was also about like lyrically and
Hmm.
thematically about that, and it's just musically about that. So like, if that makes any sense, like I'm looking back at this stuff and I'm like, oh, this was really great, but this kind of sucks, but this was really great. So like, let's immortalize these kind of nice things, but it is also very sad. And it was also the same. It was the same thing about the just going through it. It's like I have these recordings and it's great. I'd love to do more, but I'm gonna put stuff together with it, and it's kind of sad. So that level of mirror, was really cool. And it was really therapeutic in a way where it's like, yeah, I've got people around, but I'm not even Pandy happened, and I'm like, I'm not working. I'm working from home, but I'm not like at the office. So
Right.
it's like, I it's so important, I think. A lot of people go through stuff and they like just bury themselves in work, they bury themselves in social activity and whatever. Maybe, the worst case scenario being like an addiction,
Hmm.
another, just I mean, you bury yourself in something so you don't have to feel your feelings. And the whole kind of like idea about like, certain practices of meditation is like a lot of people think like, oh, it's meditation, I just gotta sit there and not think about anything and just be one with everything. It's like, no, like like the Tibetan Buddhists and whoever else, they're like, no, you sit with your feelings that you haven't felt all day because you've been running around avoiding them. So and that's how you heal and that's how you grow. It's like you need to feel your feelings. And I don't think enough people really understand that. And this was the way for me to kind of feel this stuff. Um, in the best way I could. Uh, yeah, it was really really great. I mean, there were and then I was kind of digging through old photos and there were some really nice shots and just stuff that um I started to associate with some of the pieces. And it got to a point where later on I'm like, I have a library of images and I'm like, okay, what and as I'm listening to something, you know, I'll have them all up on one
Hmm.
screen and have another with the session or something. And as I'm listening, like I can, if I have an image, I'm like, oh, that's, you can't really speak to it too much. Like that sounds like that one. That's got the
Yeah.
same aura as,
It's something that's deeply personal. I mean, it's,
yeah, right. And not even the fact what was going on in the image or what that day was or anything like that. Even thinking about kind of objectively, where it's like, oh, this photo has a mood about it.
mhm.
This music has a mood about it. And they, if you're going to be looking at them simultaneously, and then in photo or video form or something like that, it's like that connection has to exist. Um, and at the same time too, I had like a couple of like words scribbled down. Some of them were just like really small ideas, like a couple of words, maybe a sentence, and it just got expanded on as soon as I started to kind of sing over some stuff. And it all kind of like came together in that way, where it's like there was like this simultaneity about it,
Mm.
where it's not just like, okay, here's the song, what's the album cover, it's like, no, here's the song simultaneously developed with this visual component
Right.
that was simultaneously developed with these words that are also the music. There's it's hard to talk about them as one, but that's really what the song is. It's not a vehicle for text or anything like that. It's very much this thing that's uh, homogenous. It's all of these things, and it's this art project mostly through music.
Hmm.
I was like halfway through it. I was like starting to get to the fifth track, and it was only just these musical clips of my previous partner playing, and I realized in the fifth one, I'm like, well, going through it, and I'm like, oh wait, there's some themes snuck in from another piece we were working on, and it's like, or it's in, it's definitely in the same key, and there's some of the same, kind of some of the same ideas in there, but it was mostly improv. So I opened the session from that other thing we were working on, and there was some like, violin and cello and string improv in there that was just like shut off and didn't make it to the final thing, and it was just kind of just existing there. And I brought all of that in. I brought in like
Hmm.
however many takes of all this improvisation from string players, to the point where I'm like, I don't know who this was who played it, because 3 violinists were in this track. I don't, and a viola player. And I still don't know who some of it was. Um, and I put it on. I just kind of like, again, very much like I was before with the with the rest of the stuff, just kind of piecing it together. And I ended up like but taking these clips and slowing them down and speeding them up and kind of quantizing them and making them fit in this context a little bit more. Um, and it was this really interesting kind of idea of sampling. And I did that for the fifth one. It's called Blueberry Parking Lot. And it was just, because it was something that really didn't need a lot, didn't really ask for a lot of kind of me,
Hmm.
a lot of words or a lot of me doing
Right.
the processing too, obviously, and this kind of arranging, but me as my voice, it didn't really need that. So I said what I had to say and or what needed to be said, both same thing, I guess. And then kind of filled that void in with these ideas, these kind of clips from other things and other people. Um, that same track that I pulled them from does have this level of nostalgia too about the relationship in a couple of like ways, but a little further removed. But it was really great, and then I'm like, and then the next one comes and it just became part of the process. And the next one, the holding hands one, um, I reached into uh, a project that I'm a part of, we're both working
Right.
on,
Right.
and took just a clip of our vocalist voice, and then took some of the saxes and just kind of like, and this stuff isn't out yet, so
Yeah.
so it's it's still very much in production. Um, and it became like this thing where I started to like, oh, okay, wait, no, this is more than just this one thing,
Hmm.
and it started to get this idea of sampling and taking other things and adding this kind of level to it, where it's like, oh, this is growing, this is cool, and a lot of it came from, uh, there's always this discussion about like, is sampling really creative?
I think it's a contextual thing. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it's, if someone just wants to sample something and run it just as like a straight track under something, like, is that the most creative thing? Probably not.
Right.
But creating entirely new textures and parts and everything out
Yeah.
of things that have already been
Yeah.
recorded is a different story.
I mean, essentially, now that you say it that way, that's exactly what I did,
Yeah.
but that, in kind of this collaboration through time kind of way. That's how I see it, but
Yeah,
really
no,
it's
that
sampling.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, it's the same way as in the project we work on, the way we use our effect pedals and everything like that.
Yeah.
A lot of people, just stomp on them live and that's that. But you can use those pedals as an instrument.
Yeah.
Y-
No,
it's all about
it's all
context.
about
It's all about the way you
context.
look at
It's all
things.
about the tools, like you have these things, and as long as, nobody's finding you and shaking you out of for your pockets when they hear it, I guess that's okay. And a lot of it, like I listen to a lot of Bon Iver, and he put out this song, called "Please Don't Live in Fear," and I play it for the first time. I'm like, "This sounds really familiar." Like I know I love Bon Iver, I listen to him all the time, but this sounds like familiar. And I listened to it again, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, that's that's an Alabaster de Plume track." It's like this saxophone player, and it was this track. Like it wasn't the whole track, but it was like
Mhm.
the opening, and it was like literally this track, but with like some stuff over it. And I was like, it was just like this really cool thing. And I go back and I listen to the original. It's a song called "Visit Croatia" by Alabaster de Plume, and it's like vastly different from the what Justin Vernon had done with it. But I'm like, this is like sampling. This is
Mhm.
this is like something that like it really turned me on to this idea. And and then that got me thinking, like, oh wait, I have like this whole library of stuff that was
Yeah.
recorded. Maybe I have like so many things that never made it into projects. Maybe I could just take them and you know do that too. Like what's why not? And it became this giant sampling endeavor, really. If you look at it, where's the line? It's like using
Right.
a vocalist song, like a vocalist melody from a song, or like, taking one piece of something and processing it so it's unrecognizable. And that was for me, it was like, let me make this stuff unrecognizable first, because, you know, let's not make it really obvious
Right.
what it
Yeah.
is. But as I went on and I did the last few songs, I'm like, forget it, man. I'm just gonna let it be what it is. And I think it became more apparent what, like
Hmm.
more honest and less processed. And it kind of evolved too. And I just started, the way that the album is structured is the way that the order in which they were created. So it's, 1 through 9 it's this very kind of linear thing, and I've never done that before, because it's always like you make these things
Right.
kinda
Yeah.
simultaneously, and it's like, "Alright, how do they fit? How do they make sense?" And then you start to edit them in that way. But this was very much like, "No, you know, I'm not gonna mess with this. This was a procession, because I was going
Yeah.
through
Exactly.
these stages of things and looking at different things." Yeah, it was really
Yeah.
gr
Like the order is very much part of the process.
Yeah, the order, yeah, and the product, and probably the why did I say that? Product, the end result. Yeah, the order was very much part of that. So, and as you see, and I'm gonna, probably, when I listen to it like a year from now, I'll be listening to it like, hopefully I'll discover something, or make certain observations about what happened along that to kind of shape
Hmm.
these pieces, because it was so interesting. In the fourth one, I it was singing falsetto and everything, because that's really what I was most comfortable with, and that's what I was kind of, that was my default range wise, just because, whether I'd be doing like pre-production for like a female vocalist, just to kind of like show them what was written and just putting it in there for them to sing, or just I was just up there. But like the last few lines of that fourth song, I dropped my voice like an octave, at least an octave, and I was like, oh, this is cool. It's like I don't usually sing like this. This is cool. And then and then like the next one where I sang on, it was all down there. And it was just, I started to discover stuff, and that was also me discovering the context in which my voice worked best. It's great. And it was just kind of like discovering this kind of like low, kind of vocal stuff that I've never really explored before. It was really cool. So in that way, there's like a linearity to it, and the sampling.
Right.
Like it was really mostly just the fifth and sixth track. I mean, like I was throwing in some old recordings. I mean, there in the second track, there's some nature recordings that I had like recorded with my, previous partner. Um, and that just kind of made it that much more, kind of
Hmm.
tailored to what it was. And it was, became like almost like a sound design thing, but it's like a John Cage kind
Right.
of
Yeah.
like everything's music. That's a whole discussion in itself, because I very much agree with a lot of it. I think he was kind of an extremist, though, with
Well.
everything being music. No, but he's not wrong. But you read his book, everything I've like read and seen, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And then you read his book, and I'm like, oh, this guy's really into it. This guy's like, this guy wants to get rid of like organized music and just take sound. But yeah, and with the sampling in the
Hmm.
in the fifth one, and then much heavier sampling in the sixth one, which was a really great one, because I was using Natalie Post, or the vocalist for the project we're working on now, a line in which she sang in that project,
Yeah.
and just one word from that. So it was it became its own thing. It wasn't that whole vocal in the context of that vocal line. It was just this one word, and it made sense too in the context of what it meant to what the song was about, for these two people. But then the thing is, from that same song, I took all these saxophone parts.
Yeah. I know, like the pitch shifts, and just like again, like the theme of like creating something entirely new out of like these finite resources.
Yeah, and it was really beautiful. Yeah, like finite.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I could probably take the same 20-minute clip and make like
Yeah.
100. Like that skinning a cat. However many ways. Um, yeah, and it was great. And I took these sax lines, and it was just in a different key, and created chords out of them, I pitch shifted them, and it was pitch shifting at like a half step, a whole step,
Hmm.
a step and a half, just so it really didn't really, you couldn't really tell that it was anything was really happening to it. It just
Hmm.
kind of really sounded natural, and took them and really moved them around, and just had a lot of fun, moving those things around. And I got really crazy in that one with it, and I was like, this is perfect, this is cool. And then the next one came, and I was like, I'm gonna take a step back, because this the last, if I keep going, when this is just gonna become this other thing that it isn't. So I took a step back, and for the last two, which I finished last week, they were much more intimate, much more emotional, um, emotionally oriented. And I think too, listening that from start to finish, I think for me at the very least, I was channeling emotion more successfully through vocals. Um, where and by the end, it's like this really intimate thing where, so like, channeling, I was getting better at channeling emotion through, I think, as I went, just
Hmm.
because it was something that, it's like a muscle in a lot of ways, but it's also kind of the context of how you're feeling in the
Right.
moment. And I was only working on it when I was feeling it, and these things came out like that, and it was like, one of them I turned around, I did 20, within a day. Just because it was very much the project that I had to kind of be in that mindset for,
Yeah.
which I find is rare. I'll get back to that in like a second. But yeah, so you can see, hopefully, for me at least, looking at these things as a linear kind of procession, it gets kind of more emotionally driven as it goes. And I think just because I got more comfortable with that, and by the end, even the production, um, going through the production, and how much reverb is needed on the vocals. The eighth one, there was no reverb on any of the vocals, and the the last one, very little, if any. Like it was very much, and it's like kind of this psychological um, thing for me, where it's like, you have all this reverb um, on someone's voice. It's kind of soaked.
Hmm.
There's this kind of they're far away from you, kind of perception, if you're thinking like in a literal spatial context, or you're in this big space, right? When you take all that away, um, it's like, look, there's nothing on our
Yeah,
voices right
the
now. It's this
intimacy.
small
Yeah.
room, and it's intimate, and it's like, oh, this person's right here sitting on my lap singing to me about,
Yeah. That's
how
exactly
he's
what
hurt.
we're doing right now.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it was like this really wonderful. I totally lost it. Oh yeah, yeah. So if and it ended up working, in the context of this, it was at this level of emotion, and you know, I very much had to be feeling it when I was working on it, because then it became ingenuine. You know,
Right. And I know that's like a departure because, in the past, we've said a lot of the time, like, if you're not feeling it, just,
just get
sit down,
started.
pick up a guitar,
Yeah,
sit behind the keyboard,
yeah.
whatever, and just get started.
It was
Something will come out.
exactly, and I think it's interesting, because a lot of the stuff we've worked on wasn't fueled emotionally to this degree.
Hmm.
And I'm, I've always worked as an artist, thinking like not really oriented that way too. And I think that's was really special about this to me, is that like I really discovered like, oh wait, like I'm real. This is a really
Hmm.
vulnerable thing, and like I'm getting more comfortable, and I have stuff to kind of emotionally kind of express. Whereas everything else, it's just, I never understood like the creative, like, oh man, I got writer's block. It's like, you just haven't picked up a pen and paper. You haven't tried, and it's like a muscle. And I've always kind of believed that. But this gave me some perspective to that, which is really interesting, but there's a balance, like if you're not feeling I know people say this creative juices aren't flowing. It's like, no, you're not flowing, but if, you could still pick something up, but you have to write about what you're in
Yeah.
feeling in the moment, and then there's this like there's this book, it's called The War of Art. I forgot who wrote it, but it's called The War of Art, and it's really wonderful. And it really talks about this kind of like natural resistance we have to be productive, and like how to kind of understand how to work through that, and I mean, so it's, just do the work, but it's kind of said in a better way. But yeah, and that's why I stopped after the third one initially, because I was like, oh, I'm good. Because I didn't know what it was going to be. Didn't know it was going to be this 9-track thing. I was just like, I'm just going to make one. I'm going to make another. I'm going to make another one. Oh, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. I'm okay. I think that's it. And then and make 6 more over the course of a month. Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, and now I'm kind of like, I'm not, I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, no, this feels like a good end to this record at least. But yeah, I don't know. And the question comes up. I ask myself, and I've had people, I had my friend. I've been showing some of this stuff to. Kind of asked me, he's like, are you gonna keep going with this? Like, because it's like, is this like a one and done? Is this? And I keep going back and forth on it. I mean, right now, like, it brings me back to what the project was about initially.
Mhm.
It's like, no, this is about 2 people. This is for 2 people, made by 2 people in a weird way. This kind of silent collaboration. And I'm thinking like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all ultimately just up to you. You're not beholden to anyone to create more if you're not feeling it.
Yeah, and that's what's so nice
And then
about
if you
the
are,
project.
you could always go back to it.
Yeah, and my, when I'm asked that, when I was asked that, I was kind of like, well, I go to the root of what the project is about. I'm like, is it about these 2 people? I mean, if this record is very much that, right? And the name kind of has a meaning in that sense too. And then going back to it, something would have to happen that would like, someone would have to just like, I don't know, rip my intestines out or my heart or whatever, like whatever, fuels your feelings. I think it would have to come from a similar kind of place. And it would have to be genuine, a lot, I don't know if it would be about different subject matter. I mean, right now I'm good, and I'm gonna leave it at that for now. What would be really interesting, is like, if that relationship was repaired, and we, very much like that Sound of Animals fighting record, where, like they're not in person, because Matt Ombre didn't even meet Anthony Green until they got together for the third album, which is kind of nuts. Or until they got together for a show. He told me that I didn't meet him for the first. I didn't know him when we made the first record. I would imagine making one together with the intention of like,
right.
Oh, we're in the same room now. Not really realistic thing, but it's just, it's kind of, that's kind of for me. It's like, oh yeah, I would do that. I don't have much more to say about musically, therapeutically. I don't really have much more to kind of like put on the table with the tools I have now. So that's where I'm at right now. And my buddy was like, oh, keep going as a solo thing. I'm like, yeah, but it's not a solo thing right now. It's not, this was an outlet to express one or 2 things. And I'd have to make a decision at one point, obviously before, if I decide to continue with it. Because again, I've never needed that solo. I mean, it's not a solo, it's this outlet alone. I mean,
it's a project. It's just,
yeah. But the record is called, We Must Protect This. So it's going to moving to streaming services soon enough. Probably be by the time this is wherever it is, it'll probably be on there. And that's kind of, it's for me, it speaks on a lot of levels to what the music is. It's like these great, when you're like, fortunate enough to like be that close to somebody for so long, or like, have this kind of relationship with somebody that's kind of like really wonderful. It's kind of rare, for that to happen in a lifetime. And I think it's something that you should protect. And like a lot of people exit these things and are just like, so like, that person sucked, and it's like, no, like, look at all these great things. And it was kind of about immortalizing that. And like, you need to protect this because it's like, just because this isn't now doesn't mean it's not important or special.
Right.
and shrugging these things off.
It was still a point in time. Like
Yeah,
it happened.
right. And like if you're really crazy about perception of time, it's like, is everything really happening at once? And we're just perceiving it in a linear way. So is this really happening now? Yeah, that's a whole thing in itself. But yeah, I think it's important, and it speaks to what the music is too, because the music is kind of trying to immortalize these feelings that I was feeling at a moment, and not in like a selfish way, in like a, it's like taking a picture or really just making a collage, and that's literally what it was. Um, so the photo, each one had kind of this associated photo, and this one is one of the ones from the eighth song. But this one, if I had to choose an album cover for it, it would have, it was very much this one, and you kind of have to, because you have that like, media distribution that doesn't allow video kind of thing.
Yeah.
Everything under the same, because having 9 singles on Spotify just gets ugly.
Yeah.
And it's really this one thing. Now that it's kind of done. And this photo was just one of my favorites. I mean, all the photos were taken, a little over a year ago, by me, and this photo is really great. It really, it's my favorite, my personal favorite room, kind of in the world right now. That architecturally speaking, and it's in this wonderful building in Boston, right on the harbor, called the Institute of Contemporary Art. It's this beautiful museum, and it's just one of my favorite buildings ever. I can talk for like 6 hours about this building, and I have, but I won't right now. But it's just really, this room is really beautiful because it's let me show you. Okay, so
Oh, wow.
you see that little that little thing popping down out of the top there. So that's that room, right? It's this really, and the building's right on the water. So that's the cut through the building. You can kind of see it coming down
right
there, and it's just kind of like relief from this museum. It's this media room, and you walk in, and it's right, the building's right on the harbor. This harbor walk in Boston, it's like, it pretty much started to revitalize this industrial area, right on the water. And you walk in that room, and all you see is water. You look out this window, and it's facing down, and you're just you walk in a room, and you see, instead of seeing sky, you just see water, and you just see like a passing boat or something like that. And there's something really interesting here too, is like just the underlighting of the steps, and it's kind of like this moment of contemplation,
right
and even the railing, it's not a guardrail, but it's a handrail. This is where the handrail ends. So mean. Sorry. The perspective of this thing.
It was actually messing me with a little bit.
Yeah, because you're looking down into a room, and it looks like you're looking at a handrail that's following steps going up.
Yeah.
But you're actually, this is the one that's in line with the platform of the steps. So it's kind of like this really wonderful perspective, and I think it says a lot about perspective and contemplation. And kind of meeting the end of this kind of pathway, and kind of saying, oh, well, now what? What happens now? And it came out of and all these photos too, I kind of have this sense of isolation about them, which is really interesting, because when they were taken, it wasn't about that at all. But looking at them, there's this kind of aura about them, and some of them were taken in this building. The one for the 6th track and the 9th track for sure. It's just like this really beautiful place, that I don't get to go to very often. And this was just this kind of, really just wonderful contemplative thing, where I was this kind of encompassed, I was talking about kind of taking, working on the track, and then selecting kind of a visual element simultaneously. This kind of encompasses all of that. And I think it's kind of the strongest, the strongest one. It's just this really great place. And also it comes from a personal place. And it's not just objectively right for the music. It's just, this makes me feel something, and and that's what this project's about. And it's not for you,
Right.
this isn't your,
No, yeah, it's
you know,
something you can't
yeah,
quite
yeah.
explain to everybody
And
so that they're going to understand it the same way as you.
yeah, and it's kind of selfish. It's not for you. It's not really for me either. It's kind of for the art of it, but it's also, this is something that I came, kind of, this is like a therapeutic kind of thing for me. And it turned into this really wonderful process where it's this kind of collage of it, just a bunch of things of, a point in time. And again, I was channeling, emotions through it, and it's almost like talking to your therapist, but in this weird, where it's almost like talking to the person, or just shouting from a mountaintop. It was this really, really great thing. It was just really just like this kind of like desert, I'm on a desert island and I have these tools. What am I going to make with it to
Right.
survive, and I loved it. It was really, really wonderful. But yeah, I don't, yeah, but it's this kind of weird thing where, I want to do it as anonymously as I can. And, because it's very much about this thing, and I'm not going to sit
Yeah.
here and explain like what these lyrics mean and what these lyrics mean. There was one. I just finished the 9th one, the last one, about last week, and it's kind of like, just to give you some context, the image for the you saw the image for it, and it was this kind of like, contemplation, looking up at this monster staircase, this beautiful, beautiful staircase. And the song is very much about, kind of this climb, but you're exhausted, and you listen to the instrument, where it's kind of malfunctioning in a way.
Yeah.
It's taking the context of this kind of glitchiness, and from the beginning, where it was kind of very like much like, oh, this is entirely this one sound, and it's going through this one sound. And you're only getting hints of it here, and it's kind of like this thing sounds like this kind of like machine or robot or computer that's kind of like on its way out, and it's just like just climbing up these things, and like you're telling it's like, you're like, come on, like no, like when we get to the top, it's gonna be great,
Yeah.
it's gonna be, but we got to get there, and when we get there, we'll be like, okay, this is, trust me, just come on, but and you get this little robot walking with you, but it's like dying, and it's like, oh, or it doesn't, and it kind of it's kind of this vague thing where, does it make sense? And I don't know if it may, I don't know, but it's kind of this thing where you can tell it when we get to the top, it's going to be amazing, and it's kind of shorting out and dying, but like, can it physically make it there, like kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was this wonderful metaphor for something, just whatever you want it to be. And that's another reason to kind of keep the ambiguity for me, and kind of some of the words and kind of some of the meaning, because it's not again, I didn't want to come here to do this to talk about that, because like,
Right. It can be somewhat, at least, like open to interpretation, depending on what, anyone who listens to it is feeling.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important too, because it's like, a big part of me, and this project is the kind of, opposite of what, this kind of mindset from before, where it's like, if I have to read your lyrics to know what your song's about, you're not writing a song well. But it also goes to that, like Chris, like if you look at like the Chris Nolan films, and you have these like booming scores,
Right.
over like these people having a conversation, you can't really understand their conversation, but it's not about the conversation. It's about what
The intensity. It's about
it's about the intensity. And it was very much that, but like,
that's, yeah. I mean, I was going to bring it back to film too, because I mean, one thing I really hate is if when you go into a movie that you think is going to be about, open to interpretation, and then the director just beats it over your head with the meaning of the movie. There is no other possible interpretation, and it just ruins the experience.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's great. It's all about context, but like, you get people that get mad at vague endings, and it's like, no, it's there for you. It's like that because interpretation, and because of the, this ambiguity is really nice, because then it can mean something to you as an audience. And again, I never do this. I've never really done art for an audience. It's always for the art. And, never for. This is the closest thing I'll probably get to doing something for me. But this really just for the art of it. And my philosophy hopefully always will be, and always has been, you just make the best thing that you can.
Yeah.
You make it how it needs to be. And then you cast it out there, and that's it. And then you just jump on the next thing. But if you really want people to hear it, you gotta got to get into that like ugly marketing kind of PR stuff. And it's, this is just, just going to put it out.
Yeah.
But it'd be really nice for people to hear it too, because it's special. And I think, again, documentation of process is just so important because can't tell you how many times, I'm not putting myself up on that pedestal, but I just think it was objectively like a really interesting kind of situation. And if this resonates with anybody, that's awesome. And that's kind of, part of the point of the art is to like, and I'm a process junkie. Like I'm just like, what, how do you do this? And how, like just looking at a million different ways to make things, because that's how art becomes art. I think it's so overlooked.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
Yeah. And it's, should be less about the who and more about the what.
Yeah. Totally agree.
That's it.
Yeah. It's what is the media is the message kind of thing. Like it's
yeah.
If you don't understand how something was created, like you can't, I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, well, I guess really you don't need to know how something was created to enjoy it. Right. You don't need to know the inner mechanisms of film. You don't need to know what size lens, 35
right. Technical aspects. And
right. But you don't need to enjoy something. But, if something's made with a certain intention, a certain process, it can open it up to like a level of understanding where you're like, oh, I get this if I didn't before. Or even if like David Byrne, I love that guy's book. I read his book, never hearing Talking Heads before. I don't know what rock I lived under, but I read his book. I'm like, this guy's genius. This guy's so many great things to say. And I listen to his music and I'm like, this sucks. I mean, it just didn't resonate. I'm just being a jerk. But
I personally, I love his music.
Yeah.
But I could,
it didn't resonate with me. And it was so funny because I agreed with every word he said, and it resonated with me and it did so much for my creation, or not my creation, but the things that I've been a part of. It did so many things for, just those words. And again, it shows that, like the process and just the words about the music can be as inspiring as the music on its own, because that's the thing about music. Like you can have a really insightful discussion about it, but at the end of the day, what you hear is what you hear.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah. But for me, process is so important because I'm in the thick of this stuff making it.
Yeah.
And hopefully like, it becomes important to other people who make stuff and because if you're just making something for an end result, you're not going to make something great. You might, but your chances of are way lower.
Yeah.